Welcome back to Graveyard Dance. Today, we bring you a story that has scared the hell out of people for as far back as 5 centuries ago. Although there are no pictures of the real-life people involved due to the fact that no one had cameras or cell phones back then, we'll do the best we can to tell the story in a visual way. Before we go on though, we hope you'll consider heading over to our sponsor this week, which is Spooky Sales. If you're looking for a cool t-shirt, a small gift for a birthday coming up, or even something to treat yourself, we hope you'll check them out. I recently bought a cool Halloween mask off there the other day myself. Just head to graveyarddance.com and scroll down till you see the big Spooky Sales banner. Click there and see what they have to offer that day. You may want to check back often as their inventory changes from time to time. Also, please allow at least 2 weeks for delivery. Sorry about that, but that's something beyond their control. The prices are worth it though. Grab a snack, your partner or pet, and snuggle up and get ready to be spooked for this one. If you like it or like our work, please help us reach the next step to becoming monetized. We're trying to reach our first 1,000 subscribers and 4,000 hour watch time on YouTube. We're getting close, we're just not there yet. So if you would head to graveyarddance.com and find our social media bar and do with it what you will. Like, share, or subscribe. We appreciate everything you do. Now on to today's story. Hey there, friends. Today, I want to tell you a spooky story about a ghost called the Black Monk of Pontefract. This tale comes from a small town in England called Pontefract. Are you ready to dive into the world of ghosts and mysteries? First, let's talk about who the Black Monk is. The Black Monk is said to be the ghost of a monk who lived a long, long time ago. He is often described as wearing a dark robe, which is why people call him the Black Monk. But there's more to this story than just a ghost in a robe. In September 1954, Bill Farah and his wife Barbara moved into a new home in the historic market town of Pontefract, England. They were a young family with a 2-year-old daughter named Jane, and thus 30 East Drive, with its 3 bedrooms and, for that time, luxurious indoor toilet, should have made the ideal home. Yet less than a year later, they moved out, convincing a second family, the Pritchards, to swap houses with them. After all, the Farahs were terrified of their home. Objects would move of their own accord. Voices were heard echoing in empty rooms, and rips and tears would spontaneously appear on soft furnishings. In particular, Bill and Barbara feared for their daughter. They claimed she was often found crying with her face inexplicably covered in blood and scratches. The family had no pets to blame for the injuries, and even after placing cotton mitts over the little girl's hands, the bloody wounds continued to appear. Jane cried every night, leaving her parents utterly confused about what to do. That was until one day when Barbara rushed upstairs in response to her child's cries and discovered that a pillow had been placed over Jane's face. After this incident, it became clear that they had to flee, and so they did, leaving the house and its dark occupant to the Pritchard family. This marked the lesser-known origins of what would soon become the infamous case of the East Drive poltergeist, known as the diabolical Black Monk of Pontefract. The Pritchard family thought they might be imagining things at first, but then things got even weirder. They started seeing a shadowy figure that looked like a monk. This figure would appear and disappear, leaving everyone feeling frightened and confused. As the days went by, the strange happenings continued. The family would find objects moved around the house, and sometimes they would feel a cold breeze even when the windows were closed. It was like the Black Monk was trying to get their attention. In the early 1980s, a local amateur historian stumbled upon newspaper clippings from the late 1960s that alleged a Pontefract family had experienced poltergeist phenomena caused by the ghost of a 16th-century monk. This monk had been executed for assaulting and murdering several young victims. When Conniff discovered that the family was still residing in the same house, he realized he needed to visit them to hear their testimonies. Not long after, he contacted Colin Wilson, which led Wilson to make the journey to the Yorkshire town to interview the family. According to the details recorded in his book, the activity began not as one might expect. More than 10 years after the house swap, despite Bill Farah's claim that his young daughter was regularly and aggressively assaulted by some unseen force within the house, it appears that the Pritchard family, comprising a mother, father, son, and daughter, lived there in relative peace until August 1966. On a Thursday in that month, most of the family, including Jock Pritchard, his wife Jean, and their then 12-year-old daughter Diane, were away on holiday in Devon. They had left their 15-year-old son Philip along with Jean's mother Sarah Skulls at the house. The arrangement initially seemed to suit the family. Philip had reached an age when family holidays lost their appeal, so he spent much of his time happily reading in the garden. On that Thursday, while he was outside, he eventually returned indoors to make himself a drink. It was then that he noticed something peculiar. His grandmother was sitting in the living room, engrossed in her knitting and completely oblivious to the cloud of gray-white dust floating in the air around her. It was reported that the substance appeared chalk-like and powdery, and more intriguingly, it seemed to be falling not from the ceiling, but from a level below Philip's head. The upper half of the room was perfectly clear, yet this curious dust seemed to materialize from nowhere. When Sarah went to seek help from her other daughter, Marie Kelly, to clean it up, they discovered even more oddities in the kitchen. Several large pools of water on the floor that appeared to have no discernible origin or explanation. Meanwhile, the dust in the living room continued to descend like a miniature snowstorm, creating a fine white layer of the unidentified material on the furniture, and even forming a film atop the cup of tea that Philip had made for his grandmother. As the younger woman attempted to clean up in the kitchen, new puddles seemingly appeared. Lifting the linoleum revealed no leaks underneath, and there was no water falling from above. Just like the dust in the other room, these puddles seemed to have materialized from nowhere. The peculiar domestic situation intensified when a helpful neighbor turned off the water supply to the house. The water company was called to inspect the property. Pipes were checked, the linoleum was lifted again, and drains were examined thoroughly. Nothing was found to be broken or blocked. Consequently, the best explanation provided by the water company's representative was that some strange form of condensation, likely caused by the summer weather, was responsible for the mysterious puddles. About an hour after he left, the mysterious puddles ceased to appear. However, before the day ended, more strange occurrences were reported. Sugar and tea leaves were emptied from their dispensers in the kitchen and scattered across the countertops. The cupboards vibrated and shook, and loud bangs were heard coming from upstairs. Additionally, a plant that was usually positioned at the foot of the staircase was found relocated halfway up, without its pot, which had somehow been moved separately and was discovered on the landing above. Unable to tolerate the house any longer, Philip and his grandmother left and spent the night at Aunt Marie's house. Vic Kelly, Marie's husband, was reportedly unhappy about the unusual situation and is described as having called the police to check on the house. Everything appeared normal. There were no intruders or anything else out of the ordinary. However, around midnight, just as Vic Kelly was leaving the house for the last time that day, two small paintings are said to have fallen from the wall, with the glass shattering on one of Jean and Joe Pritchard's wedding photos. It is alleged that the door had been slashed from end to end as if with a sharp knife. Chilled, Vic Kelly simply closed the front door of 30 East Drive and walked back to his own home. Thus began the paranormal activity for the Pritchard family. When Jean, Joe, and their daughter Diane returned from their holiday, Sarah relayed the unsettling happenings. There was disbelief. However, as Sarah told her daughter and son-in-law, she mentioned that there were supposedly 3 loud, distinct bangs and a cold wind that blew through the house. After that, there was no further activity for at least the next 2 years. According to testimonies recorded by Colin Wilson, the strange occurrences at 30 East Drive truly began for the Pritchards in 1968. The unusual events seemed to resume when Jean decided to redecorate her daughter's bedroom. Mysterious temperature changes were reported, along with inexplicable bangs and knocks. Most sensationally, a paintbrush was reportedly flung across the room by unseen hands, narrowly missing Jean's face by only a fraction of an inch. It is even claimed that Mrs. Pritchard witnessed, in the dim light of night as she went to the bathroom, a long strip of wallpaper standing upright and swaying like a cobra. There was no one holding it, and when she attempted to grab it, it fell to the floor. Horrifically, the carpet sweeper then reportedly flew into the air, swinging around as if being wielded as a club by an invisible giant. Screaming, Jean dropped onto all fours and rushed back to her bedroom as wallpaper and other objects continued to be thrown toward her. The unseen presence in the house had returned and, it seemed, was more aggressive than ever, focusing for some reason on Diane's bedroom. What followed next has been described as 9 months of chaos, a peculiar gestation period during which various forms of violent activity were reported. Loud bangs and thumps could be heard coming from Diane's bedroom with such physical aggression that she occasionally resorted to sleeping in her parents' room. Ornaments would be thrown and levitated, and the lights would repeatedly turn off, along with the main switchboard. One time, The entire contents of the family's china cabinet were reportedly thrown onto the floor, yet not a single precious item was smashed or chipped in the process. This particularly chilling incident signaled an increase in the seriousness of the activity. When the lights went out, a huge shadow appeared on the wall. Diane is said to have witnessed this firsthand and up close in the hall, while her mother scrambled with a flashlight to turn the lights back on. As the teenage girl watched, a heavy oak hall stand reportedly floated into the air and moved toward her. In her attempt to escape, Diane tripped and fell, ending up with her back against the stairs and the hall stand on top of her. The Pritchards weren't the only ones who experienced the ghostly activities. Neighbors and friends who visited the house also reported feeling uneasy. Some even claimed to have seen the Black Monk themselves. This made the story even more famous. But who was this monk, and why was he haunting the house? Some people believe he was a real monk who lived at the Pontefract Priory many years ago. Others think he might have been a monk who did something very bad, which is why he couldn't find peace. One of the most popular stories about the Black Monk is that he was involved in terrible crimes against young women and children. Legend has it that he was accused of killing several of them. These crimes were so awful that it made the monk become a ghost. Maybe he wasn't welcome into heaven, so possibly this was the next best thing next to hell. Who knows? The story goes that the monk was punished for his crime, and his spirit was trapped in the house. He couldn't move on to the afterlife because of the terrible thing he had done, and that is why he is still haunting the Pontefract Priory today. Now, let's talk about what happened to the Pritchard family. They were so scared of the Black Monk that they decided to leave the house. Can you blame them? Living with a ghost is not something most people would want to do. After the Pritchards moved out, other families moved into the house, but they also experienced strange things. It seemed like the Black Monk didn't want to leave. People started to talk about the haunted house, and it became a popular story in Pontefract. As time went on, the legend of the Black Monk grew. People began to visit the house just to see if they could catch a glimpse of the ghost. Some even brought cameras to try to take pictures of him. Can you imagine trying to take a selfie with a ghost? In the 20th century, the story of the Black Monk became even more famous. People started writing books and making movies about him. The ghost became a part of Pontefract's history, and many people wanted to learn more about him. Some brave souls even decided to spend the night in the haunted house. They wanted to see if they could communicate with the Black Monk. Some said they heard whispers and felt cold spots, while others claimed to have seen the shadowy figure. But not everyone believes in the Black Monk. Some people think the stories are just made up to scare others. They believe that the strange noises and happenings can be explained by things like old pipes or creaky floors. What do you think? Is it a ghost or just a noisy house? Despite the skeptics, the legend of the Black Monk continues to live on. Many people still visit Pontefract to learn about the ghost and the history of the house. It's become a part of the town's identity, and people love to share the spooky tale. So, what can we learn from the story of the Black Monk? Well, it teaches us that sometimes things aren't always what they seem. Whether you believe in ghosts or not, the story reminds us of the power of imagination and how stories can bring people together. The Black Monk of Pontefract is not just a ghost story, it's a piece of history. It shows us how legends can grow and change over time. What did you think of today's story? Would you spend the night in that house? We'd love to hear your thoughts below. Have you ever experienced a ghost or haunting? Tell us your story, and you could have your story told in a future graveyard dance video. We used to have a group of friends who used to ghost hunt all over the USA. We've visited hundreds of locations, and I can tell you beyond a shadow of any doubt that ghosts do exist. It's not something we saw every single time we went, but those few times we did have paranormal and otherworldly things happen, it was absolutely terrifying. Anywho, I have to start work on next week's story now. If you have any suggestions, we'd love to hear them. Check out all our other work at our website, graveyarddance.com. Also, if you don't like YouTube, we are also on Rumble. Till next time, thanks for watching, everyone.